Welcome to the Future Skills Ireland podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Dunlop, Director of Future Skills Needs in SOLAS, the Further Education and Training Authority in Ireland. I'm delighted to be bringing this brand new podcast to Ireland, which will feature real conversations from people about their own skills, their own journeys, as well as give them an opportunity to talk about the skills, the research, all the issues that matter to us in Ireland in terms of skills, all with the purpose of starting a new national conversation on skills across the country. I'm delighted to be joined today by a very special guest, Andrew Brownlee, the Chief Executive Officer of SOLAS, my Chief Executive Officer, in fact, in SOLAS. Andrew will be able to give us his insights in terms of the future ambition for further education and training in terms of skills. And we'll also have an opportunity to reflect back on the really outstanding success of the last strategy, Transforming Learning. So you're very welcome, Andrew.
Afternoon, Shauna.
Obviously, this is an area that you're very familiar with in terms of future skills. And we'll have an opportunity, I suppose, just over, the next 20, 30 minutes or so, just to really try and focus in on some of those key areas that are so important, I think, for further education and training, and try to have a focus in on the great success that has been the strategy that you have led since 2020 for further education and training in the transforming learning space. But we'll also have an opportunity to talk about you as well and the skills that are important to you and maybe skills that you've picked up maybe as part of the work that you've been able to achieve and, the impact that you've made in the roles that you've had, certainly in SOLAS. So I'll maybe start by just asking you, maybe do you want to just tell us a little bit about your own journey and the skills that you have used or you have acquired for where you are right now?
Yeah, no, thanks, Shauna. And I think like everyone else, like you get skills in all sorts of different places. And, sometimes it's not from a formal learning environment. I mean, I think back and, my kind of education background is fairly standard, school, did okay at school, got into college, got a degree, kind of went into like a kind of a career which was kind of based around economics, which is what I did for my degree, and it was all fairly standard up to that point. But I never really felt like, oh, this is it, this is me finding my vocation, or this is something I'm really passionate about, until I think I was about 25 or 26, and I was like, God, is this going to be it? And I didn't go to Australia when I was 21, 22. I just went straight into work. I thought, God, is this really it? And so I took a decision then that I wanted to go and volunteer. So I went to Ghana for the guts of a year as part of a kind of graduate kind of exchange program. I'd been working in kind of community economic development at that point for a county council. And essentially I went over there as a volunteer saying I'll get involved in anything. And I travelled around Ghana kind of essentially writing business plans to set up vocational training centres around the communities. And so part of it were the kind of learned skills that I developed, from work and from study. But the massive kind of turning point for me were just the kind of human skills, the resilience, not just from me, because I could fly out there at any point, but that you saw people in immense poverty with no access to the type of amenities and facilities that you have, finding ways to be really, really happy and to enjoy life and to find ways to make living and find ways to develop their kind of skills and occupations that would then allow them to survive and get by and look after their families. So if you're asking me like what when did the skills journey really begin, I think it was when I decided to do something disruptive like that. And that's when you start getting the skills that really matter. Technical skills matter, but actually what really matters are those kind of transversal skills, the resilience, the ability to communicate with anyone, the ability to kind of understand people and get on with people, and analyze situations and come up with the best. And I think that was the first time that really struck me that, yeah, like, you know, this is what it's really all about. And, you know, came back, went to Australia then, after Ghana, again though, but that was more kind of about meeting new people, seeing new places and cultures, trying different environments. And then almost immediately when I came back, I ended up in Ireland by accident. My first job was in Ireland was putting graduation gowns on people. I worked for the graduation gowns company called Phil and Conan. It was totally different skills you needed for that, but actually it wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't. We say it was different, but actually that was all about people too. It was all about being able to engage with people and talk to them, make them feel at ease, and, you know, make them feel excited about their big day. And it was a kind of temporary job while I was looking for a permanent thing, and then I ended up in consultancy and HEA and then SOLAS from there. But it was like that. Those kind of skills journeys. Yeah. I think the second I realised that there's so many different people in the world, and the real skill that's at the heart of everything is being able to talk to them and understand them, and I identify with them and empathise with them, and then find ways to work together. So that's a convoluted way of saying what I think is important in terms of skills development, you know. So yeah.
No, I think, you know, if you went to Ghana so early, I'm sure that experience probably stays with you as well. I can't imagine that you would, you know, go into that space, and especially when you see the way the world has gone, you know. So like that's, I mean, I didn't know that actually, that you had been to Ghana, you know, at that stage. But yes, that connection that you have with people and wanting to, you know, make sure that they're being listened to and they're being responded to, and, you know, all of that is clearly a drive for you. So it is interesting to kind of hear that story. And then thinking about the strategy. So we've had the further education and training strategy in Ireland since 2020. And, you know, like obviously I was there at the time as well. And it was a very strange time in the world where we'd had the strategy kind of drafted, then the pandemic started very early in 2020, and the strategy was actually launched. And sometimes you forget this, don't you? You know, when you look back over the last few years, that 5-year strategy to transform learning, which was so successful in Ireland, actually came in at a really, really challenging time and period where further education, yet again, as is always the case in Ireland, I think, had to step up and meet the challenges of the time. But one really important element that you had put in that FET strategy, and there were three sort of key pillars, was skills. And that skills, I think that component for skills, and I think we'd all agree, and any of us who are involved in further education and training and seeing how that played out, that's had a massive impact and massive success, wouldn't you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so. And like, you know, and it's kind of really heartening that you open the podcast, you talk about further education and training, because I'm not sure 6-7 years ago anyone was talking about further education and training or knew remotely what it was. And sure, you'll remember even within SOLAS, there was an awful lot of debate, and including with our comms team, around whether we could actually create a sense that further education and training was something, like, because people said, oh no, there was too many different bits, you know, you get the VEC, adult education stuff over there, you got youth reach, you got apprenticeship, you got like PLC, like, and there's no way we could market that as something distinct or something accessible to everyone. But I think like we cottoned on, I know we had conversation at the time, like that is what's unique about it. Like there is literally a learning opportunity for just about every member of society, no matter what age they are. That's, you know, takes you from, you know, early school leaving, upskilling throughout career, wanting to return back into work, even like keep your skills relevant when you're getting older, you know, to maintain remain an active person in society. And I think that was the beauty of what we kind of cottoned on to when we were thinking about that strategy, that actually, you know, FET isn't the fallback. What we have here is something that could be valuable to everyone. And that's really the mantra that we kept to. And the fact that, you know, all skills are equally valid and equally valuable. Going back to my journey at the start, you know, transversal skills are just as critical as any technical or vocational skill that you develop. And I think based on that, like we had a really exciting strategy where we looked at how we could build all skills across society, how we could offer people pathways, from the most marginalised and excluded communities and situations to move towards the labour market, to develop their transversal skills first of all, and then the vocational and technical skills that could actually take them into the labour market, or maybe take them into university or college beyond our sector as well. And I think it really has been transformative. The key was in the title. Like we've grown since 2019, so 2020 when the strategy was launched. I think we've grown the size of the FET learner base by about over a third in that period, despite the COVID challenge that you mentioned. And if you look at the impact of SOLAS funded learning activity, from the construction schemes that we run, the apprenticeships that we support, the FET courses that the ETBs run, the e-college online learning portal, which went through the roof during COVID times.
Everybody wanted to learn.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone wanted to learn. We had the resource, but we didn't really let anyone access it. So we thought, well, why don't we open it up? And all of a sudden there's 40,000 people a year learning through that resource. And, we now think we have about 1 in 10 adults in Ireland engaging in some way with the learning that we support. So that's quite a footprint. And that immediately gives you access to a whole cohort of the population that you can upskill and reskill and work with to really move things on. So.
Yeah. And that, at the heart of that strategy really, as you say, was the skills part. And then you had alongside that the pathways, so creating pathways and fostering inclusion. And I mean, that was nearly like, it was like a trinity that had come together that really made things happen. And I think, over the period of time, we've had the pandemic, we've had the crisis in Russia, we've had so many people from Ukraine come in, be welcomed, be supported in the further education and training system. And as you say, it has continued to grow and it has continued to support people. And I think in that skills space, another thing that may be part of, why it was so successful was that targeted approach to saying we are going to make sure that skills are covered, and we're going to fund on that basis. Transversal, as you say, hugely important. Making sure people with disabilities are coming into the system, making sure that people are actually, we're tracking people and seeing, are they actually getting certified training? Is it in the key skills needs area that we have for the country? Like, do you think maybe having that approach to, that this was a government mandated approach nearly, you could say about it through the different mechanisms we had. Do you think that was a contributory part to the success of kind of the skills revolution almost that we've seen there?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that 3-pillar Holy Trinity kind of strategy really, really worked, because I remember again at the start, there was a view that, FET that we call now was 2 different things. You got all that furry kind of community ed, adult education, ESOL, very basic kind of support stuff, social inclusion side of the house. And then you had the kind of harder edge, kind of vocational technical training, and they were 2 separate things. And I think the beauty of the strategy was we created that 3rd pillar, which was about pathways. We said, no, like this is all about moving people along the national framework qualifications, developing their basic skills, giving them a chance to focus on areas they're interested in, and then look at, well, where could this take me in terms of a career or a job? And so that concept really worked, but the concept wasn't enough. And like, I think what we've really done is from an early stage, we said, we're going to measure this. We're going to find ways to measure if this actually works or not. And people go, we can't measure pathways. And we're like, no, we actually can. We can. We can measure if we're actually certifying people at levels 1, 2, and 3, which didn't really happen in the past. It was kind of like, that's that informal community education. We don't need to worry about cert. The people that don't care about it. People do care.
Absolutely.
People want recognition for the learning that they complete. So one thing we measured the ETBs on, and set targets, and asked them to hit contributions, was around certification of level 1, 2, and 3. And then we also measured whether they were moving people up the NFQ, whether they were actually moving from course to course and developing their skills and moving closer to the labour market. And again, set quite ambitious targets for the ETBs despite the environment that we were in. So, I mean, there is an element of that for me is a really important part of the success of Transform and Learning. Is that if you read the Transform and Learn, we actually said what we would do and talked about measurable targets that we would deliver. And then 5 years later, you're actually able to go, well, actually, we did all of that, and here's the change. And I think that's a really important part of it as well, and when we think about the future, being able to measure, being able to anticipate where skills needs are, that is the key to success.
Yeah. And it was a huge kind of connected space that had to be created, wasn't it? So like SOLAS, SOLAS with the education and training boards, with their own providers as well, with the department, with the other departments that are all connected as well. So it's not even like education and further education and training is not just with us, really. It goes so much wider, doesn't it? Yeah. And you think of some of those kind of emerging, or I suppose they were kind of emerging skills areas, back, 4 or 5 years ago, the green skills, the near zero energy building. And I don't know if we even really knew how important, they were going to become, or the level of priority that would be needed. But having that kind of foundation space where like there was a target for green skills, there was a target for, making sure that we were looking, at digital, at adult literacy, that it was connected in that kind of bigger space than us, really. Yeah. Like what's, when you reflect back on it, like what do you think about that idea where specific skills areas were kind of called out as well as part of that approach?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, the one thing, like we've referenced it a couple of times, and actually we wrote the strategy and then COVID came along, so a draft was sitting on the desk of the minister. We didn't know who the minister was going to be, but we knew there was an election, we knew there was going to be a minister. We had a draft on the desk and COVID came along and disrupted everything. But I remember we kind of reviewed the strategy in the context of the world has changed, and everything's going to need to be agile. And I think the incredible thing was, I don't know if you remember this, like we changed very little. Like we did include a reference to COVID, but actually the whole premise of the strategy was we were going to be there for everyone. We were going to offer bite-sized, flexible, accessible learning opportunities, move people along pathways. All of that was entirely relevant to what the pandemic brought us. And I think you talk about the change in specific skills areas. I think the digital transformation that the pandemic almost foisted upon us, the ability of FET to respond to that was incredible. Yeah. And it's an area, there are areas where we can't show progress, but in terms of digital skills and digital capability, there's incredible evidence now that take up of online learning opportunities, I think, is the highest in Europe. I saw last week in Ireland. Now
we're making progress, definitely.
And in terms of lifelong learning, our participation rates are growing year on year. So we're a very tech savvy population. And that has happened in quite a short period of time, and that gives us a real opportunity now. Green skills, again, I think is an area where we've really pushed the boundaries as well. I think in the last strategy, we kind of set, an ambition. Like we talked about green skills for all. So we made a pledge. Every FET learner was going to have access to the understanding of sustainability, the understanding of their own carbon footprint, the carbon footprint of the company that they worked for, in order to be able to be the agents of change and make a difference. And look at, we put in place, microquals and modules that I think about 65,000 accessed in the end. So we that kind of showed us the potential. And then we looked at specific green skills linked to construction, zero emissions buildings, retrofitting skills, modern methods of construction courses, and really kind of built that up from the ground up over the last few years, and then started to think, well, what are the other areas like energy, sustainable agriculture that we could focus on? So I think what the last strategy did was it positioned us as part of their answer and showed we could provide part of the answer. And then I think in the last couple of years, we've seen really exciting developments in terms of, well, what do we actually need to deliver in terms of green skills in the next few years? And one of the big kind of successes, big milestones in recent years was the publication of the FET Green Skills Strategy, which was a cross-industry, cross-government, very intensive piece of work, which I remember Fintan O'Toole launched it for us, and I read it and was blown away by the fact that, oh my God, this isn't a doc that sits on the shelf or, you know, someone a policy wonk came up with. This is actually a plan to deliver the green skills that government and industry and individuals are telling us they're going to need, you know, over the next kind of the next 6 years. And I mean, that's an incredible achievement. And I think it points to where we're going with the new strategy now that transforming learning's done and dusted, you know, that actually we need to be the go-to place for some of those critical areas for our economy and for our society.
And that does move us then into kind of the future skills. And, you know, I think a lot of other, you know, guests are talking about future skills still being the skills we need right now. You know, they're not just, you know, new skills or continuing the skills that we have. They're building on what we already know. And you've mentioned, like everyone else has mentioned, transversal skills, you know, is hugely important. But the future skills, like there are, I suppose, certain areas that are probably emerging, particularly for further education and training, building on the success, you know, and how we've seen that evolution of skills and how it has really impacted and reached so many people across communities. I mean, even in terms of green skills, I mean, our Skills and Labour Market Research Unit, they've just recently produced some information, and it's fascinating, really, and it gives us really probably a big blueprint now for future development. But we're looking at potentially 75% of employment in Ireland being associated with some level of green skills. You know, 400,000 people involved in some kind of their work or some kind of their skills are linked to this. And it's the first kind of research we've ever had in Ireland. And I think it's probably going to be hugely important to that future skills space and the future ambition skills for further education and training. So like, there's that one certainly, and there's others. But what's your thinking then, Andrew, maybe about, you know, maybe key areas for future skills in that ambition space for further education and training?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think we are in a space now where skills needs are changing in front of our eyes, you know, and in so many critical areas in regard to digital and AI and green skills. And, you know, they're becoming the kind of the must-haves for any job, whether you're in the service sector or whatever. And so we have to be in a space where we can respond very quickly and turn programs and courses around. And look, I think the green example is fantastic, you know, and part of our job now will be to anticipate what's coming down the track very quickly and turn that into something that people can use to upskill. And the fact that we can tell that 75% of jobs have some green element is incredible. Like that we can break down every job in this country into different capabilities and components and say 10% of that is green, you know, or, you know, and that's a phenomenal asset to have. And, you know, we talk about the potential for a national skills observatory. So we understand in minute detail now the components that go into our jobs and the skills that are needed for our jobs. And just imagine if we could build on that into a real kind of robust kind of future focused kind of model that actually says, okay, and this is how those capabilities are going to emerge and evolve. And so I think it's a really exciting time. I think you always have that risk of, you know, you try and be all things to everyone. And I think, look, our sector has traditionally been strong in a number of key areas of the economy. And that's where we have to make sure we are the go-to place for upskilling and reskilling. So look, I've already mentioned construction. That's an obvious one. And like we have to be at the forefront of change there and digitization adoption of modern methods of construction, retrofitting our buildings so that we can meet our carbon reduction, our climate action, targets. Manufacturing is another one, which is where the whole space is changing, but it's something that we can really respond to. I think healthcare is another. I think hospitality, retail, the experience economy, such an underserved part of our economy, but one where digitization is critical. I mean, you walk into any store or restaurant now and it's all around digital systems and digital service and things like that. And I think there's so much that we can do there in order to upskill and reskill people as well. And then the final two are we mentioned the green transition, and we need to be at the front of that, because actually that doesn't involve there are new jobs, there are new green occupations. That's definitely part of it. But the vast majority of the green transition is around evolving the jobs that we have already and the skills that we already have, building on them. So that means there's a massive role for upskilling and micro qualifications and dip in, dip out delivery. And that's what we need to focus on as a VET system, providing accessible access to those type of skills. And then I think the other opportunity is around the tech industry. I think more and more tech companies are saying we don't need people with degrees. We need people with good transversal skills, basic technical understanding, and someone that we can mould on the job. So we've seen really successful tech apprenticeships, but we've also seen people like Microsoft work in partnership with their ETBs to develop, offerings in the cloud or around cybersecurity, and that gives them a person that they can then mould and develop with the skills that they need to turn into a really successful employee with a really good career. So
So it's still big ambition. Still big ambition, but clear ambition certainly in some of those kind of skills areas. And then in the kind of the general space, I suppose, more for Ireland then, moving it. And I think we've recognised that further education and training is a component part, of everything that we do here in the country. But thinking of the country as a whole in terms of future skills, what do you think are the kind of couple maybe of key future skills that we need to focus on in the next few years as a country? Obviously, further education and training will play a huge part in all of that. But as a country, what do you think in terms of that national conversation that I think we are starting on skills?
Yeah, I think it's all about that. It's just the twin transition is what everyone is obsessed with, and it's always it's the easy way to answer it, and it kind of is reflective of what we talked about for the last half hour. But it is critical, because if we don't find a way to respond to those two
digital
opportunities, then we're obsolete, we're irrelevant, and I think we need to remember that that's why we're successful, because we're able to offer a really skilled and talented workforce that attracts people in and then keeps them there. So I think for me it's around that. I mean, everyone talks about use of AI and what that means in different industries and different occupations. I think I'm really encouraged. I'm really encouraged by our government, actually, because the adoption of that kind of framework for responsible AI, the fact that we're proactively saying, we are going to embrace this, we are going to adopt it. We're not going to be scared of it. We're not going to worry about, of course we're going to worry about protecting our privacy and cybersecurity and all of that. But actually, we're going to use AI as an enabler of everything we go, and we're going to use the fact that we're a tech-savvy population to say, well, we're the place to go for your AI skills as well. So I think that would be the key kind of the key priority as we move on. And I think, look, we're talking about what to call the new strategy. I mean, you never get the right answer, and you always say, well, you can't call it that because you missed that.
Do you know what it's going to be called now?
I have a sense, but I'm loath to say, because again, we're back in that position. We have a new minister, and of course, policy is owned by our minister and our department, and so they could change the name tomorrow. But definitely, in the subheading or somewhere very near the top, and I think it is definitely in the first two lines of the strategy document that's sitting there, is that we need to prepare for a digital and a green world, and that's where we need to position VET. because I think we are much more agile. We've a long history of providing short, focused upskilling courses in a way that meets the needs of a whole range of people who need to access that education and learning. And I think as long as we keep to that niche, then we'll always have something unique to offer, which maybe differentiates ourselves from the universities and from higher education.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you look back over the decades, it's very clear that the further education and training, system and all the components of that are very often the first point of call, when it comes to a government priority, and it could be a challenging priority that we have, or responding to a crisis, or very much so as well, it could be the answer to huge opportunities that are coming our way. But it does sound like, from where we're going, that skills are still going to remain a very central component of the new strategy, building on the success of how that has really delivered, I think, in the previous one. So we could talk all day, but we are coming to the end of our episode now at the moment. But I do want to give you a chance to finish. I want to give you the last word, Andrew. So in thinking about that new national conversation on skills, and you've touched on a lot of kind of key points and key areas, that are going to be critical, I think, to how we develop skills in the future. But do you have any sort of final thoughts or reflections or lessons even, lessons learned from all your experience that you think are really important to include in that national conversation?
Yeah, well, I suppose I'll tell you, we've thought a lot about what comes next, and you come up with your strategic objectives, and you get your comms involved, and you think, oh, this looks shiny and bright, and then someone goes, well, what are the 4 big things? Like, what are the big things that you're changing? And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't. but actually, if you take a step back and say, what are the big things that are really going to drive skills development in the next 5 years? I think, first of all, fundamentally changing the way we deliver education and training. Like, we have a good platform in FET, but we aren't going far enough to make opportunities accessible, online, flexible, all year round. We need to do more. We need to create that dip in, dip out system so people can go and get access to upskilling whenever they need it throughout careers and lifetimes. Second point is we specialise. We specialise on those critical areas of the economy that we mentioned. Third point, I think, is the environment. We talked about FET College of the Future in the last strategy. Now we just need to talk about the FET College now. And giving people access to that college environment, no matter where they are in the country, or what course that they're studying in. And I think the fourth point, it goes back to the different cohorts that we serve, the marginalised communities. Like, learning education on its own is not enough, we've discovered, for those people, unless you link it to the wraparound support, the health, the social welfare, the child care, the community development type supports that will actually allow them to sustain, education over a period of time, despite all the challenges they're facing in their wider lives. And that fourth point around the community impact, around linking up our education with wider services and support, that's going to be key to success in terms of upskilling everyone and giving access to the upskilling that we need.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, those are great words, I think, to finish out on, and certainly that sense of a full societal approach, really, that makes a difference. So thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me and being part of the Future Skills Ireland podcast. And I think we'll all, we're all excited and looking forward to seeing, what the next further education training strategy will bring based on what we've seen already. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Shauna.